Hi everyone, and welcome to another live session. So today I'm hosting Joanna, and Joanna is or was herself an international student, and she's here so we can ask her, some questions about our experience. Hi, Joanna.
Hey, how are you?
Doing great, doing great. So I'm going to jump right into it because we have people who are watching and are wondering, first of all, when you became an international student, so how did you decide to become an international student or study abroad?
Well, I had an older sister who did a year exchange in the States, and I wanted to follow in her footsteps because she had that amazing experience. And so I decided when I was 14 to apply through an organization that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, but through an organization to a homestay program in the States. And that's
Wait,
how
you are 14, you said? 14 years old, wow.
Yeah,
That's young.
Yeah, I was the youngest in the program to go abroad. I think 15 is, I turned 15 in the year when I went abroad. And so, yeah, I was the youngest in the program.
And so what did your parents say about it? Just like go follow your sister? That's what
I don't know. I honestly don't know how my parents did that. I'm mom myself now, so there's a lot of questions, and I am working in the industry, so I know the ins and outs. But I am actually really proud of my parents to let me go. But I think they just had a foundation of trust in human beings and just thought, if she really wants it, we'll support her, and they always did when it came to education.
Okay, so you are 15 years old and then you traveled abroad, and so where did you live?
Well, I studied, I originally signed up for a public school program with homestay, and I actually left the country without having a homestay and went to the orientation weeks because they said, well, if we don't find a homestay, you stay with the coordinator. So I went abroad. I don't know if that's even possible nowadays, but I went abroad, and during the orientation weeks, they found a homestay for me, which was in Georgia, Macon, Georgia. It was actually in the year of the Olympic Games that took place in Atlanta. So it was a really busy summer. And there was a family that was like the parents and then 6 kids. So totally opposite of what I experienced back home. It was a true culture shock whatsoever. And then instead of being with the public school, the family thought they'd do me a huge favor and convinced the private school that the daughter attended to give me a full scholarship. And I was their first international student at the school. So you can imagine what hoops you jump through. And as a 14, 15-year-old, having that image of the lockers and the yellow school bus, and then suddenly you're in this tiny little school. It was like, okay, how I'm gonna make this year, make it my year. And it was a little bit of an adaptation process, but it was worth it in the end. So I don't regret staying with it.
It's culture shock, right? You're coming from Germany, 15 years old, you know one thing, and then you ended up where you said in Georgia, right?
And yeah, down south.
How did you deal with being around new language, new people, new food? By the way, I was an international student myself, so I do understand what you were going through. But for people who are watching us now, please share how do you deal with that?
Well, I think there was several points to really working through the hard times that you have when you go abroad, because everything is so new and you have to adapt it, and you can't expect that the people change for you. You need to adapt to what you come into. That's the mindset you have to go into a year abroad. And basically my thought process was my parents paid a lot of money, and I actually saved up money to do this year abroad. So there was no way in the world that I would quit this year. So that was my first thing. I'm going to make this my year no matter what. Second was and you're going to always experience that. You come into a family and they're like, oh, we know this German family and we know this German, but you should connect. And I said, I don't want to connect to a German family. Then I could have stayed in Germany. So I was really in a truly English environment. I didn't speak a word of German unless I spoke to my parents back home. But back in the days, we don't have email, we didn't have WhatsApp. It was letters, and once a month we had a call that lasted like 5 to 10 minutes because it was very expensive. So I really was exposed to it. I had a fabulous organization behind me that checked in with me, and the coordinator that was in charge for that program really supported me through the ups and downs. And I think it's always like looking at what is the alternative. Like there was a point, I think 4 weeks in, where I said, I do want to go to a public school. I want to have more courses. I want that truly experience. And then they explained to me, I can do this, but then I would have to get up 5 a.m. in the morning, and it took me an hour to get to the public school and then come back. That's the experience I wanted. And then I thought, well, then I'm losing out with my host sister, who was the same age as me, and we really clicked. We shared actually a room. I wouldn't have the flexibility of doing after schooling program that, because he came home so late, there was nothing else to do. So I decided to, I didn't, and the third part was I didn't want to close the doors for future international students, because I was the first one at that school. And if they had a bad experience, then how would that portray for future students? They might not consider that again. So I said, I'm going to fight this through, make the best out of it, and just, ask for the things I need, explain my position, ask why they're doing things. And that really got me to it. And I think it's also, the culture adaptation came not only with a big family that I was part of, and that was actually pretty cool, but they were very religious. They had their rules that I had to attend church service. So I love to be around little kids at that time already. So I was in the nursery during the church service and spend time with the kids. So I think there's always a way to make things better if you look for it and stay positive. And I think that's what I took out of it, because that year really was the foundation for me to many other international experiences. And basically moving to Canada now 10 years ago. And I think this is what I would say to any student that I talk to, is that no matter what program you choose, no matter what school you choose, no matter what country you choose, you will go through these waves of adaptation. And in the end, it's on you to make it your wonderful experience. You just have to find ways to ask, to be observant, to see how things work and not just judge them, and maybe sometimes adapt to the things that you learn. And that really opens a lot of doors. I mean, after 25 years, I'm still in contact with my home state. They moved to Colorado. The kids have their own kids now. They're all spread around the world. One of them lives in Spain. I mean, it was a real foundation for a lot more things in my life.
So you finish the high school, right, at 15, you go back home at 16, and then what happened then? You said, I can't stay in Germany anymore. I want to, let me go somewhere else. What was the process of?
I think you go through a reverse culture shock, because I exposed myself so deeply into that experience that when I came back, I didn't want to speak German. I found the language really rough. My mom really had to force me to go back to.
Tell you stop start speaking German, stop speaking English.
Yeah, so I had to do that. And the hard thing for me back in these days, you had to repeat the year. So not only did I have that additional experience and was more mature and independent, I also had to go a year back. So all the peers were a year younger than me. And it took time to get used to it. But again, I think it was worth the experience. I didn't regret it. And I just, took it on again. I think it was harder for me coming back than going, just because I was the independent kid then. I did all on my own. And I think my mom had to be very open-minded, because I brought a lot of things home that I wanted to integrate into my life that was in her culture and her adaptation. But in the end, I think every time you have experiences abroad, you bring something home with you. You take a part of it and integrate it into your daily life. And I think it's like playing two pianos. You can choose to just play on one, but you could also play on both. And I think that's how I see the world now, is that culture is how your own culture is what you take into traditional day-to-day routines, things that you want to do. Like, I give you an example. My host family would give the kids every year an ornament for their Christmas tree. So by the time the kids turned 18, they had a box of ornaments, and when they moved out, they took that with them and could decorate their own tree. So I took that. My family didn't do that, but I do that for my kids now because I found that was such a cool little thing to do. And I think this is with any experience abroad. You take something back and integrate it into your own life, and that's the beauty of these experiences. Well worth it.
So how did you end up in Canada? Like, what led you to Canada?
Well, I had a few more experiences after my first year. I lived a year in Spain during university with an Erasmus year. I did a language program in Malaga, Spain. I lived in Switzerland to do my master's. So lots of exposures. In the company that I worked for my master's with, they were an exchange program. They focused on boarding schools, and I basically worked for them during the summers and during their seminars as an alum. And then they sold their German side, and I started working at my last year university with the new owner. She took me in after university, and that's how I stayed in the international education world. I really love to help young people to, have that experience. And then 2010, I was asked by the owner of a school here if I wanted to join their admission team. And I said, well, I'm on maternity leave. I would love to check it out. I don't know if my husband will like it because he has never lived abroad. And we went end of 2010 with our newborn. And after 3 months, we decided we would stay. So we really enjoyed it, and we do not regret it. It's a beautiful country, and at this point we have no intention to move back, and really love being here. So that's where I am. And since 2010, when we came, once we had our own home in 2011, we actually opened our doors for homestays. So we have been really in that environment through and through from all aspects.
And it's a great story, because I agree that once you kind of step out of your home country and people that and you become traveling the world, there's more opportunities. There's more opportunities for work. There's more opportunities to do stuff that you probably won't be able to do in your home country. And when you wrap it with education and with the right program, it's definitely something that influence the rest of your life. And I'm sure that if you didn't go to the 1 year, you'll probably still be in Germany or traveling somewhere else, but didn't have the same experience. So it's a great story. So if there is a student somewhere around the world that's listening to us right now and very excited about the opportunity, what would be what's going to be your first step? Okay, what's the first step they need to do?
Well, I think the first thing is to just go, like nowadays so much easier. You go on the internet and you just Google it, just look what's out there. There's a lot of, like, ApplyWave has all these programs. You can just go on a platform like ApplyWave and check out what's out there, what programs are there, what's my interest, and then reach out to experts in the industry like you guys, and talk to them and say, listen, this is where I am, this is my financial basis, you're my parents. I think the earlier you can do it, the better it is for your, foundation for life. I think the younger you are, the more you take in, the easier you learn. It's a hard part for parents to let you go in an early stage, but it's well worth it. And I think that's how you started. And then you reach out to schools, or if you find a partner that you trust, that's for me a key. Find someone you trust that can really guide you through all of the programs. There's so much out there. If you Google it, there's just too many things out there. So if you have an expert that has the variety of products, you can say, well, what would the summer program look like? What would the language program look like? What does the high school program? What are the advantages of this? And I think with that, you have a great start on a foundation, and attending this call and these events. I mean, that's the first step. Like, get hungry for international education, and then don't be scared. Like, there is a way for everyone to accomplish your dreams. And I think being a mom myself and seeing international kids, I think I would suggest it to everyone, even if it's just a summer experience, even if it's short term. it doesn't matter, but it opens doors in your mind to a better future. And I think education, as my parents always said, is the most important, to have a good life and to be flexible and to be adaptable. And I think people that have studied abroad have that kind of flexibility and adaptability that others might not have as easy. So I think that's how I would start. Like, go on a byway, get an idea of what's out there, talk to the people that have the knowledge, and then take it from there. And I think it's all going to fall into your lap once you start it.
Exactly. I mean, you're right on the point, because as you know, I also, when I was 16, around your age, that's when I wanted to study abroad, and my biggest dream was to study in college in the US. And I remember myself 16, 17 years old, with no internet, and just phones, trying to find a way to go overseas, and it wasn't very easy back then. And it's much easier now. But one of the things that are kind of challenging to me is the parents. And I know if you're young and you obviously don't have money, your parents have the money. And in your case, how was you were second to go after your sister, but what was the process of convincing your parents to doing that move? Because you need that support. I wouldn't be able to go without my parents' support as some of you. How do you kind of bring the support?
I think there are several ways. Like in my case, my sister actually got a scholarship to go abroad because we grew up in the GDR, and there was a scholarship program right after to bring young GDR students abroad so that they have that experience. When I was that age, that didn't exist anymore. So I reached out to several organizations that had scholarships available, and I got a little bit of a scholarship. But then my parents said there's very limited what they can pay. So I went to my grandfather and said, listen, can you lend me the money and I'll pay you back? I really want to do this. This is important to me. So he basically paid up front. In the summer when I got back, I worked and paid it off again over, I think, 2 summers to pay him back. But I think it's, if you really want something, there are ways to do this. There are people that will support you. There are scholarship programs. There's ways with parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts who say, okay, I'll do it, but you have to pay me back, and like get a loan, because you get that foundation, and then the things will come your way as well. And to convince my parents, I think there was not too much to convince of because they had that experience with my sister. But I think it's understanding the parents and where they come from. And so if you have a good support, like with a partner, with an agent that knows what parents go through, that's a good one too, because when I speak to parents now, convincing them to send me their kids during grade 9 to 12 to my school, I always say to the parents, take the time, sit down and think of the advantages your child will get with this, that you want the best for your kid. And this is something that if you can afford it, support it, because you will get a student back that is highly motivated, that is easy to adapt to new challenges, which we have all seen these past 2 years have been difficult. But these kids that have done it, they know they will get through this. They know that they will survive and they will work hard. So I think there's a lot to it. And then understanding that the parent will be home and sitting at a table where there's an empty chair. Yes, that's it. That's a big thing. And I don't think we should underestimate the sacrifice that parents give to have their kids study abroad. So in my case, with my school, for example, I reach out to them, I check in with them, I send them pictures, I talk to them. And I think the connection nowadays is so much easier because you have WhatsApp and Zoom and Skype, and you can basically talk to your kid every day without even having to pay for it. That was very different when I went abroad. But I think it's for parents to know that your kids will be better off and will have a way better chances in life in general. I think that's worth investing. So if my kids come and say they want to do it, I will support them. I think for me, the most important is that whatever program you choose, from other parents' experience, from the partners you work with, that it's a safe environment, that they're reachable, that they're communicating, and that your kid doesn't disappear in the year abroad. I think that's a key, that you have a strong connection to someone at the school or at the program that you can reach out to if you don't get a hold of your son or daughter, especially in the younger years. But otherwise, I think there's lots of support available to parents as well. And that's when you work with an agent and a partner, they also know what they go through. And I think if you as a child can convince your mom or dad, then arrange a call with the school, arrange a call with the agent. And we take that time and explain it and have that understanding of the sacrifices the parents give to make this worth it.
Amazing. So, and another thing about the parents. I mean, how do you have any advice about, how do you talk about budget? Because I think sometimes kids in high school, 16, 17, 18, sometimes 20 years old, I'm not sure they understand, the money or not involved enough. Your parents can afford or they cannot afford. Or what can they afford? What's the approach, with your parents? I mean, did you ever ask them, hey, I want to go, but can you afford going? Or how did you do that?
It depends on the program. Let's speak about secondary education. I think there's basically two programs. You can stay at a boarding school or you stay in a homestay with a public school program. I believe in the boarding school, the majority of the things are covered. So you pay something, the fees, and then the extras that the kids spend is maybe on an ice cream, a movie night, something like that. But they're limited. There's not a lot of extra that you need to give to your kids. Maybe winter clothing and stuff. Yes, that comes to it. But there's nothing out of the ordinary when you have these boarding school private. With public schools, that's a little bit different because you're in a homestay and you can't expect the homestay to drive the kid all around, go on trips. So you have extra costs there. Not for food, that's all included as well, but for, extracurriculars. If you want to go skating, you pay for that extra. If you want to go in a dance studio, the student has to pay for this extra. I mean, those are things that you have to be aware of. And, usually when you are at a public high school, you're not necessarily downtown in a place, you're sometimes on the outskirts of the town. So make sure that you're aware of the travel costs. But these costs that occur are also something that you as our partner know very well what comes up, and it depends on the kids. I do think that you should limit your kids' budget for personal spending and very clearly say, if you spend more, you got to pay me back, because I think that's part of the education for our kids, to value the funds that the parents provide, and not just, they haven't earned it, so it's easy to spend. So I think that's a part of the education abroad that the kids will learn. And if parents give them a limit, and then if I always say to the parents, if your kid comes back and says, I need this and this and this, and you're not sure if that's real, reach out to the school and say, listen, my son and daughter said they need this and they need this for school, and they need that. Is that true? And then you can get a perspective on it if that's really needed. I think it's a communication thing. But I do think that these young kids specifically, they do need a limited budget, because otherwise they just spend it and they don't value it as much. So I think that's a conversation you should have with your child when they go abroad.
So we have questions, coming from one of the viewers. And by the way, if you have any more questions to John, I just, feel free to, put it in the chat box. But we have a questions about, about the scholarship, and they ask if it's possible to apply to scholarship before applying to university or school.
So yes. So for high school, there are scholarships available. It depends on how much you're looking for. It is unrealistic to think that you would get 100% scholarship to a boarding school. I get these questions all the time. It breaks my heart. I wish I could help you, but that's not possible.
Yeah, so they have to submit the paperwork first, right? They need to get accepted to the school first. And when the school kind of look at the document, look at the biography, look at the grades, look at their achievements, look at everything they can submit, then you can go and say, well, I think this is a great student. This is how much money we can give them, right? That would be the right process.
There is payment plans as well. I mean, that's the other opportunities, right? If your parents say, well, we can't afford it all at once, there's also payment plan options with some of the schools. So go through the application process, submit everything, speak to your partner, what kind of scholarships each school. Don't apply not knowing what is there. Like, be realistic and reach out to the school up front and say, what is possible for me to get, and then you should like calculate a little bit and then apply and go through the process and submit everything. Some schools have specific requirements for scholarship. It really depends on what you're applying for, but yes, there are options, and there are organizations. Like, I know in Germany we had an organization called Assist, and they would give full scholarships. They do fundraisings to get kids abroad, so they go through a very rigid process to select these students. But yes, that is possible, and there are organizations out there that have that. So it's just a question of who to connect with.
And by the way, this is, this information, about how much scholarship any school can give, people can find on the Flywave. They can see the tax rights and they can see the maximum amount of scholarship that you or your school can give. So, I encourage people to, search on the Flywave for different opportunities. And in the meantime, we have another questions about, did you have any difficulties for the first time in the US? So that's probably specifically about the US in your experience.
Well, I love the US. Don't get me wrong, it was an amazing experience. But now, having lived in Canada, I see the differences between how they approach international students. I mean, both countries have a lot to give. So I think the hardest for me with the US was you're either a US person or you're an international person. So to give you an example, with Canada, you're an international person, but at the same time, you can feel Canadian and you can be part of the Canadian. So that's a very different approach. So one of the other things is also what I would suggest to you, no matter where you go to, US, Canada, Australia, you name it, it's very important to separate yourself sometimes from the international students that are with you at the school. Try to make these connections to Canadians in the US and the locals by joining sports teams, going into music offers, dramas. Extracurricular really bonds you with the locals, and that makes your experience so much different. If you stick with the international crowd, you will never truly expose yourself to the local community. So I personally suggest to families that want this to go to smaller towns, because there's not such a wave. Like, if you apply to a school, for example, in Toronto or in New York, these schools will be flooded with international students because that's the image they have and they come. And so if you go to a little school in, let's say, Brockville that I'm located at, or Merrickville, the amount of international students is not as big. But having said that, thinking about Canada, for example, we are an immigration country and we're really founded on that. And the same with the States. So I have met many true Canadians. So you have a lot of double passports and citizenships. So be open-minded to that too. I think it's how you expose yourself to it is to speak the language, really do go into the different traditional things that they offer. Like, there might be things where, like, I'm not really interested to it because you haven't done it before. Maybe it's something that you like in the end. So I think a lot of this is very important. How I felt in the States, I loved it. I love my American friends. And I still am in touch, as I said before, with some of the students from that time, with families from that time I met. And the same is with any place I've been to. Spain, Switzerland, I have still friends. It's in Canada the same. So I think it's how you approach it and how open-minded you are. I think if you come with that mentality, I'm a German and that's who I am and I'm not going to budge, then, it's going to be hard for you. But if you go in and say, I'm going to take myself a little bit back, watch it, observe it, and integrate myself in what the others do and try new things, I think that's how you make your year successful no matter where you go.
That's great. So we have about 2 more seconds, and I'm happy that you kind of wrapped everything up by saying you have to adjust and and go out there and experience, and that's great. And I really appreciate Joanna, that you've been here with us today, and everybody is watching now. You can feel free to contact Joanna and answer more questions. It's going to be available, and you can use the chat box or meet with her on the platform. So again, thank you, Joanna. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and have a great day.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.